Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Hezheng Yin, co-founder and CTO at Merico. I'm also on the PPMC of Apache DevLake. So it's great to see so many familiar names in our audience today and so many new ones too. Today's exciting occasion. Our guest today is a friend and mentor, Sharan Foga, ASF board member and Apache and also PMC chair of Apache Kibble. So Sharan, to have you introduce yourself, I'd love to lead in with a question. How did you get your start in open source? What did your early days look like? And what convinced you that the Apache way to building open source was so compelling?
Wow, that's a lot of questions. Well, to start with, how I got involved with open source, it was my partner actually that was more interested in open source than I was. It was a few years ago actually, 2007-ish. I was working as a consultant for ERPs, and my partner was doing programming and stuff like that for open source. And he sort of tapped me on the shoulder one day and he said, "Have you seen this?" And what it was an open source ERP from Apache. So that was Apache OFBiz. And I was sort of like, yeah, you know, open source ERP. I've been working all these years for a proprietary ERP, so people pay to have the software. So it was really interesting and quite strange to see all these people working on an open source version of an ERP and giving it away free. So really, really odd. So that was my first sort of interest in open source. Then because I'd been working in ERPs for such a while, I sort of looked at the project and I saw that it wasn't complete. So I thought, well, hey, you know, I could help fill some of the gaps where I could see there were some things missing. And that was how I started to become involved with that project. And my contributions that I had at the time were around documentation and around sort of like functional testing and helping people see how the process, the overall process would work. So it wasn't a code contribution, it was more like a non-coding contribution, but it was something where I thought that I could actually add some value. So that was my sort of first sort of foray into open source. And the early days, well, the mailing list was this was the first time I'd actually been got used to, or encountered like a mailing list for communication. So that was really, really strange. Also, it was really strange working and discussing things with people that you'd never ever met. So you could see that there was a lot of activity happening. There was all these discussions happening and all these people with their different characters and stuff like that. And it was just a different way of being able to communicate with people. So that was, for me, something completely new. And so that takes a little bit of time to get used to, because I think that, you know, as projects come to Apache and they see the mailing list, they think, it seems a bit sort of, but it is. But it also has its benefits and value because it creates a record, and also as well, it's quite balancing. Not everybody has the highest tech and can communicate in the same way. So the mailing list is like a leveling factor as well. So I think that was really quite cool. I think the third bit you talked about was around the Apache way. So when I joined this project, I knew nothing about the Apache way at all. And for years, meanwhile, I was contributing to this project, I didn't do anything with the Apache way, didn't understand it, didn't do it. It was only in 2014 when I actually went to my first ApacheCon in Budapest. I was a TAC recipient, so that's the Travel Assistance Committee. So just quickly, if you want to go to an Apache event, or ApacheCon, but don't have enough funds to get you there, then you can apply to the foundation, and they have the Travel Assistance Committee. And if you get accepted, you can get sent. They'll pay for your airplane and your tickets and your hotel, etc. And in return, you help out in the conference. So I was a TAC recipient in 2014, and I helped out in ApacheCon in Budapest. And it really opened my eyes to the foundation. I met a whole load of people. I met the project people that I've been talking to on the mailing list for a few years. And that was really exciting. It was just like, you know, family. But it also showed me a little bit about seeing the Apache way in action, how all these people that are working remotely all of a sudden come together, and it's like a family, it's like a bond. It's amazing, really, really great. I mean, sometimes it can take a while. If you don't get the Apache way now, don't worry, it'll come. And, you know, just don't feel isolated because you say, okay, I don't get all of these bits and I don't understand the consensus and I don't understand this and what. But, you know, it'll come. It comes over time. So I say, be patient.
Thank you, Sharon. I always enjoy these stories, you know, from the early 2000s collaborating open source, and it's, you know, just very different, a different time than you know, these days. Yeah. And I think so. Before I get to the next question, I think I see a special guest in our audience today. So I want to give a quick shout out to Ted Liu. So Ted is the guy who helped connected me to Sharon and made today's event possible. For those who don't know Ted is an ASF member. He's on the PMC of the Incubator and Community Development Project. And hopefully in the future, we'll have the honor to invite Ted to be our guest at the future meetup. And thanks for joining us today, Ted. Okay.
Yeah, kudos to Ted as well. Excellent.
And getting back to the questions. So out of all the projects you have worked on within Apache, Sharon, there's this one project called Apache Kibble, which aims to solve similar problems with DevLake. So we are really curious about Kibble. And so can you tell us about the backstory of Apache Kibble, how it got started, and what motivated you to join Kibble? And what do you think the role of Kibble's data would play in community building for open source?
Okay, so a few things there. So the Kibble backstory. So Kibble, before Kibble, there was Snoot, and Snoot.io still exists. This software was something that the foundation used. They were paying for the service and they used the data and the analytics that Snoot provided to help in creating things like the annual report. So every year the foundation produces like an annual report. It tells you about what we've done, what sort of statistics are, who are the most active projects, how many lines of code, and who are the top committers and stuff like this. And we were using Snoot to produce this information to help us with the annual report. And then we were offered, all the projects at the foundation were offered the opportunity to sign up to Snoot and visualize their individual projects details. So that's what I did for Office, and it was really interesting to be able to have a look and see what you could, the sort of metrics and things that you could track. So it gives you some insights into the community. So the owners of Snoot, which are also linked to some of the ASF contributors, they decided that they would like to open source or donate the code to the foundation. And then the donated code, I think it was 2017, that donated code became Apache Kibble. So Snoot still exists, and I think they've gone off and developed it in a slightly different way. But the code that was given to Apache became Kibble, and we've looked at tailoring that more to Apache and building on that source code. So that's the sort of story of how Kibble came into the foundation. So it was another software, and then we were given that software and open source that software for the foundation. Right. The next bit, I think you asked about sort of my motivation for joining it. So I'd already used Snoot for Apache OFBiz. I could see some of the metrics and the things that it could show you about community. So I thought that would be really good, because joining Kibble, it actually also gave you the opportunity, or gave me the opportunity, to sort of look at developing it in the ways that I could see were perhaps missing. So, for example, I was really, really keen to understand how we could identify non-coding contribution, because I was a sort of non-coder myself. And when we look at things like, you know, becoming a committer or becoming a PMC member and things like this, they are recognition for things that people do as they earn merit. And earning merit is something that you produce something of value for the community. And most people think, well, okay, it's a software project, so therefore that means coding. But there's lots of things of value that you can produce for a community. And they include things like, you know, just even answering questions on the mailing list. It can be testing sort of JIRAs or test bug fixing and things like that. So some of the things that are not actually captured in, say, the code or the commits, because it's sort of, you know, if somebody asks you a question and you respond, then you can't, that's not committed to Git or somewhere. So I wanted to see how we could actually use and capture that information to help. So that was my sort of key motivation for joining Kibble and being involved in it. And I think the third part you asked about how we can use it for community building. So right, okay, so there's lots of things that Kibble can tell you about a community. So the most basics, and I think DevLake, you do it as well, is, you know, you look at the GitHub repo and you look at, you know, what's going in and what's coming out and things like that. You can visualize it, who's doing it, when did they do it, you know, all that sort of stuff, which is great. You can also look at things like, you know, the JIRA tickets, the issues, you know, how many issues have been done, how long they took, and well, that sort of thing as well. And that's fine. But you can also look at, like I said, you know, you can look at the mailing list and have a look at the people that are answering the questions and the people that are asking the questions. And so therefore you can identify the people that may be appearing on your mailing list as answering questions, but not appearing on your GitHub code repo, or not appearing in your issue tracker. So therefore you have somebody that's, you know, hey, providing some value and being able to identify it because they're helping the community. There's also the sort of metrics around, you know, what does your community look like now? How many people are fairly new? How many people have been there sort of intermediate? How many people have been there, you know, sort of long term? So you can look at the cycle of, is your community bringing in new people? Are those people staying? And are those people becoming experts and training the new lot? So, you know, obviously the thing with open source communities is that you don't, just because you're in one doesn't mean you have to stay there forever. And lives change and people want to move on. So you need to make sure that the community is healthy enough to allow that change and that evolution. So that's some of the reasoning around how I could see that we can use sort of Kibble for community building. And one final thing here is around the Linux Foundation has a project called Chaos, and it's a community health for open source software. And what they do is they define various metrics that help, you know, like I say, tell you how how healthy a community is, or what sort of health the community is in. And they have different sort of software. I mean, I mentioned, I think they have I've got the name of it now. They've got at least two softwares that they have that say, hey, these software implement some of our metrics. And one of the things that I'd like to do, or like to see, is that Kibble also become part of that and be one of the software that is recognized by Chaos as an implementation of some of their metrics. So that's how I see that, you know, sort of Kibble going forward. And one last, I keep saying one more and one more and one more. So one more thing. So the Kibble demo that we have on the website, right? We pull in all the data for all of the ASF projects. So, well, I know I did have a look actually, and DevLake isn't in there, but I can set DevLake up as a source. But the demo for Kibble includes all the live data for all the ASF projects. So if you wanted to go in and look at your project in the demo, you could. If you wanted to go and set up a view on your projects and do something, you could. So I think that's one of the things that's really quite compelling about Kibble, is that we've got the data there, all the project data around the ASF, and so but we're missing something. We need to do, we need to evolve what we have into something a bit more. So yeah. Okay, so a long answer, I know. I'm sorry about that. It would take too much time.
No, not at all. Thanks for the longer version of the story. And I highly recommend everyone to check out Kibble's live demo on their website. Sharon earlier gave me a private tour of it, and it's really interesting to explore all the different, views and functionalities of Kibble. And I'm really glad you brought up, Chaos and Chaos software, Greenmore Lab and Cauldron.io. And speaking of metrics, is there, a personal favorite, metric in Kibble for you? And, is there in a similar way, is there a favorite data source that you like to check out usually when you are live down?
I think the pony factor one is really quite interesting, because this is, I think Chaos call it the bus factor, because this is sometimes projects don't realize that their pony factor is low. So this metric is more about who are the key core contributors that if they left the project, a lot of the activity would stop. So it's almost like how many people would need to leave before the project either stalls and maybe eventually dies. So, and you want this number to get growing. You want this number to be bigger, so that, because it means that the community is more robust. So the pony factor is a really interesting one. I like. And the other metric I like is the one that I think I described before, which is the evolution of how many new people are coming into the community, how many people are staying, and how many people are becoming experts. So if you have new people and experts but no intermediate people, it means that people are starting and then they're leaving and not staying enough to get experience. So that's also really, really quite interesting. Sorry, and what was the second one? The other question you asked about the bit.
The second one is the data sources, like you mentioned, GitHub, Jira, and maybe mailing lists and so on. Any particular data source that you find interesting?
I think the mailing list is an interesting one, because in the current demo we don't have it, but we have had it in previous versions, where, because the mailing list is quite interesting, we can actually run some sort of sentiment analysis over the conversations. And in the past, I remember we had an occasion where, I think it was Tomcat, and we saw a big dip in negativity and on a particular month, on a particular day. And you can actually go back drill down and find the day and the month and the year of when the negativity happened, and go to the mailing list and see what happened. And in this case, we found that this dip in negativity had been caused because somebody had been posting a whole load of source code to the mailing list, and it had the word "not" in it. I think they were doing some logical test or something like that. And because it had "not" in it, it had generated a really low negative score. They said, okay, right, okay, we need to do some fixing in the logic around the sentiment analysis there. So yeah, that's the one I think is really most interesting.
There are always so many edge cases to be fixed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so for the next question, this is per community's request. I want to ask you about more on the open source foundations and ASF. So there are probably many misconceptions about open source foundation, like why they exist, what they do, how they work. And so how would you describe the role of open source foundation like ASF, and what are the most common misconceptions in your experience?
Okay. So let's start with the role of the open source foundations. So an open source foundation, I suppose, is a bit like a company. It's an independent entity. And the first question is really, so why would you, like you say, why would you have one? If you're a single open source project or a couple of open source projects or something like that, then and you're fairly small, then you probably don't need one. But the role of the open source foundation is to be like an umbrella, and it's an umbrella that creates like an environment and an area where open source projects can grow, so thrive and grow. So some of the things that open source foundations can give you are organization, structure, governance, processes, so common processes. So imagine here, at the ASF, we have, I don't know, 300 odd projects. Imagine if they were all doing something different. Imagine how difficult that would be to manage projects doing whatever they like, whatever. But if they have a particular process, hey, this is the process that we need to go through. If you're doing a release, you need to do this. We have a merit structure, so around the committers and around PM, we have governance for the projects governed by their PMCs. So the foundation give you a structure, an organization sort of framework to help manage and oversee open source projects. They also provide the environment and the tools to help support the projects to do what they do best, which is build software and grow. In a foundation itself as well, is that because you've got multiple projects, you have that sharing, that collaboration. If the fact that you have so many projects that are going through the same sort of cycle means that, if you have a problem in a particular area, then there's probably likely that another project has already been through that and can help you get through that a lot better and a lot faster. A key aspect of the foundations are protection. So you as an open source contributor, the foundation actually protects you. If you think about what you do, if you're giving your code and your time and things to a project, that project is released. People can take that and use it and create something. And in the sort of private world, if somebody does something and it goes wrong, then people are sued. Now, with the foundation, you have that protection. So as a contributor, people can't sue you for something that you've done within Apache. The Apache takes that burden to help protect the individual contributors. So it is like a shield, I could say, for the projects and the contributors. Another thing that you get in the foundation, I suppose specifically maybe Apache, because we're more about independence. We're more about saying, right, individuals make the foundation, not companies. So here you'll find that we really promote not being influenced by any company. And you'll find projects where competitive companies or people from competitive companies will collaborate together on common projects. So, and that's quite interesting as well, because that's what the culture and the collaboration is all about. Other things could be like financial support, legal, branding, trademarks. I'm trying to think. The thing I mentioned about security. We have our security team that sort of helps identify, log and help projects through bug releases and bug fix process. Yes, and of course there's the culture. So and the Apache way. So each foundation has their own, I suppose, goal. And the goal of Apache has been to provide software for the public good. I think, if you look at the other foundations like Linux Foundation, Eclipse, Software Freedom Conservancy, they all have different goals, and there's no right or wrong. It's just different, and depending on what you want to do with your software project, perhaps, then that will also, you can choose a foundation that sort of matches your needs. So those are some of the sort of key things that I think the open source foundations can add value or bring to software projects. I think some of the misconceptions are around confusing. I mean, with Apache, it's hey, have you heard of the Apache Software Foundation? No, yes, I don't use the web server. They confuse the foundation with one of the software, right? I've had that a lot. A lot of people think, oh, don't use the web server. Another is that they confuse it with a license. Yes, there's an Apache 2 license. There's lots of different licenses, but the foundation isn't only the license. And I think also some people think that, okay, I've got foundations are places to put projects that are, just about to die or something like that. I don't want, my project is just about to die, so what, let me just try and move it into a foundation so I can go off and do something else. And that's not really the role, I think. A lot of when you look at projects that are in the foundations, they're there to grow and thrive. So they're building community, they're building awareness, they're trying to get increased adoption. So, bringing a project that's at the end of its life, trying to bring one into the foundation is not a good thing, unless there is a foundation that is dealing with specifically for projects that are into life. Okay. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention for the foundations as well is around incubator. And I know DevLake, you're in incubator, so that's also something that the foundations can offer. So help in understanding the process before you graduate and become a top level project, or find out that, hey, this isn't for you, and maybe it's good that you found out early rather than later on. So that type of thing.
Thank you, Sharon. And to me personally, one of the most amazing part of ASF is the incubator and the mentors in the incubator. They have helped us tremendously in building this project and the community. Yeah, and I have so many more questions to ask Sharon, but we are running out of our time. But before we let you go, Sharon, do you have anything else you want to share and promote? And how can people get involved with Apache Kibble, and where can they find you?
Okay, right. Okay. So, what can I say? So let me do the Kibble context first. So there's the Kibble mailing list. So dev@kibble.apache.org. We have a Slack channel as well on the Apache, the ASF Slack. So for Kibble, so you can contact me on the mailing list. I have an Apache ID, so Sharan@apache.org. If you want to talk to me about Kibble. Kibble is one of these projects that I mentioned that has been maybe sort of stalled a little, and we're looking to try and re-energize it now, because we were looking to rewrite it, do a complete rewrite, because we wanted to make it more flexible. And looking at DevLake, I see that there's some things that you've got in your roadmap that I think will also be very useful for Kibble. And when we look at the actual architecture of the two projects, they're very, very similar. I mean, you have the runners, we have the scanners. You have a plugin dashboard. Plugin dashboard was one of the things that we wanted to do, and we were looking at Superset for that. At the moment, we've just got widgets. So I think there's a lot of things, a lot of ideas that we could actually share. So if some of the community is interested in sharing that knowledge and helping us build up Kibble, then please feel free to get in contact. Either contact me myself via the Slack or via the mailing list. That would be great. And anything else do I want to promote about Kibble? No, not that I can think of quickly.
I think the DevLake community is very much looking forward to collaborating more with Kibble. And we are right on 7:30. So Sharon, on behalf of everybody in our audience today, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today and for sharing your insights. This was really a fantastic discussion. And thanks everyone for joining us. Please join us on Slack. You will see the invitation link in the chat. We'll be sharing the recording of this session there shortly. And you will be the first to know about our next guest and our future open source session there. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us again. And I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.